Well, welcome. My name is Jim Alcon. I'm the editorial director of BookTrib, and we're so glad you could join us for this latest author interview in our series. Today we're talking with Herb Fried, and let me tell you a little bit about Herb. He started his adult life as an ordained rabbi. He's written about 25 screenplays. He has directed and produced 15 films. And last year, he wrote his first book, Beshert. And the protagonist in Beshert is a rabbi turned director. Now go figure. Why would you write a book about a rabbi turned director? Who can imagine, right? But let's talk about Herb's new book, Love, Faith, and a Pair of Pants. I'm going to hold it up. It's a kind of a cute cover. It's covering my face, which makes it even better. So Love, Faith, and a Pair of Pants. It's been called, and I love this, I heard somebody call it Catcher in the Rye with a Yiddish accent. That's terrific.
That was one of the first reviews we got. A lovely review, but the accent was lovely.
But I think if you say that to somebody, Herb, enough said. You know, Catcher in the Rye in a Yiddish accent. But anyhow, the book, it tracks over 30 years in the life, loves, and travails of its protagonist, the smart, witty, and spiritual rabbinical school student Ben Zelig. And I think the book has a lot of humor for sure, and a lot of pathos, as we'll get into. So you ready? Here we go. First question, I'm going to read you a quote, and you're going to know the significance of this quote, but I want you to share it with our listeners. The quote is, "All fiction is biography, and all biography is fiction." So I know that that's a saying that appeared, I guess, above the computer, above your wife's computer, your late wife's computer. But tell me a little bit about why she would put it there, what its significance is, and how it pertains to your writing in Love, Faith, and a Pair of Pants.
Marion was a great writer, and she's the one who helped me learn how to write. We learned when we started writing screenplays together. One of the things she used to say was that she loved writing so much because she was a great reader. So I said, but reading is not writing. She says, oh no, the best reading I get is when I can pull something out of my computer and see what I just said, which is what writers do. And so to go on to, all writing is biography, or all fiction is biography, and all biography is fiction, because what are you going to write about? You have to write about something you know. So what do you know about? You know about yourself. So you wrote, when you sit down to write, and you want to write a really good novel, you kind of begin to wonder, what do I know? Who can I talk about? Whose life can I follow the best? And so you find areas of your own life, and that's what you talk about. However, when you look at it on the screen, you say, I don't want to give my life away. It's not a diary. And so that's where the change comes in. So all writing really, really is fiction, but all fiction is biography.
Okay. Now, I heard when you were discussing your routine, you wake up in the morning, you go through your regular procedures and whatnot, and you start writing, and then you find yourself laughing. So, when I heard that, I thought, gee, that would be the envy of many people. But tell me why that's the case.
Well, because the sheer act of putting words on paper, when I sit down at my computer and say, what the hell am I going to do now? And I suddenly find myself tapping and typing and typing and typing. And then I'm saying, oh my God, this is really working. It's great. And I laugh and I love it. And then I come to a place where I said, but this one passes away. I said, oh my God, this is not funny. I said, but I had to continue to go. And I had to continue to work, because work is the joy of an author. You must constantly share what you're feeling, what you understand, what your perception of life is.
So yet with all the laughing and all the laughter and the humor, overcoming loss is a central theme in a lot of your work. So let's talk about overcoming loss, and what does that mean for you, Herb Fried, the person, and what do you think, or what would you hope it would mean to the audience, or to your readers?
Well, what I've discovered in my life is that there is nothing in this world worth as much as love. Love is the center of everything. And when you find the one you love, your bashert, you're the one who, I believe, you were preordained to find and to meet and to make a life with, life is glorious. And so you are on a level that you never experienced before because you're now two people. You now have the strength and the insights and the wisdom and the laughter and the joy of two people who love one another. But what happens when one dies? Unfortunately, we're not all born the same time and we don't all die the same time. So when the love of your life dies, passes away, you're stricken with such horrors, such misery, such emptiness, that it's really, you wonder if you're going to survive it. But that's what we all have to do. And what happened with me was when Marion passed away, it's almost 6 years ago, I didn't know how to get up in the morning. I didn't know what to do. So the first thing I did was sit at the computer and write a line, write a word. Next day, 2 words. Next day, 4 words. And I found myself writing about our life together. And that began to enliven so much of what I thought I'd lost. And I was reliving that. And in reliving that through my writing, I began to say, I could laugh again because I could look back, I could enjoy, I could live it again. And that was the beauty for me of writing.
Well, I'm sure it was very therapeutic as well. And you know, when you have that laughter and you have that love, I mean, sometimes you want to pinch yourself and say that this is so unbelievable, but you also realize how precious and how precarious it might be just in the larger order of things. So, you know, so I appreciate your answer. Let's talk about Bashert for a second. Now this was your first novel, came out about a year ago. It received great acclaim. Just what was, you know, what you feel about it? This was your first book. You wrote your book. It got a great reaction. How did you feel about the whole process of publishing your first book and having people like it?
It was so exciting. I'll tell you, I couldn't imagine anything like it. I've made a lot of films. I've actually 15 feature films over 35 to 40 years. And in each one, you put in as much as you can, and then you simply send it out, and it is what it is, and people see what they see. But this was something that came from my soul. It came from my heart. And so I had no idea how it was going to be received. And so I just said, I have to be absolutely true and honest. And so I wrote about the glory, the pain, the suffering, the rejoicing, the recalling, the laughter. And when I discovered that other people really found something in it, I found that there were around the world, in this world, and I was in over 35 cities that I've been talking to, radio hosts, television hosts, and I discover that they have the same kind of feelings about their love, their losses, their lives, and it's a truly wonderful sense of connection. And for me, that's what's so beautiful about writing, in ways that I never had when I was making films. You make a film, it's like sending out a tweet. You know, it's just you send it out, nobody responds. But a book, you'll get all the feedback, for better and worse. Fortunately, in my case, at least in that book, there was a lot of very good feedback. And frankly, I'm delighted with what's happening so far. It's only a few days that Love, Faith, and a Pair of Pants have been out, but it's been a joyous adventure because I've had already 3-4 interviews. They're truly enjoyable.
That's terrific. You know, with Love, Faith, and a Pair of Pants, let's talk about the title. It's kind of, you know, love and faith seem to make sense to the average person, and a pair of pants. How did you come to that title? And we'll talk a little bit more about the expression and get within the book, but just in terms of the title of the book.
Well, I wasn't really quite sure what to call it because there are 5 stories in the extension of a single person who was a rabbi for 30 years.
Right.
And I was wondering, what happened to him in those 30 years? Well, there was love, there was faith, up to a certain point. In the glory of his life, those were the shining emblems. But what happens when things begin to fall apart? What happens when your wife passes away? Your only daughter goes off to college, and there you are, facing a wall with nothing but a pair of pants. So when you've got love and you've got faith, love is beautiful. But every so often there's that slippage, and you have to deal with it because that's the only way back. And we do get back, thankfully, in this book.
Right. So the book is greatly influenced by the Jewish tradition of storytelling, is it not? I mean,
Well, I cannot tell a lie. uh,
well,
yes.
and I think everything you've said about you're writing about your own life experience and where you came from. I mean, I was also going to ask you the question, how did this compare to doing other forms of media? But you sort of addressed that a second ago by saying, this was a very personal, this was about you, and also just your reaction that a book versus a screenplay you've written or a film, a little different experience. Tell me about the experience, how it's different.
Well, it's different because the subjects that you write about, you may use some of your own expressions, some of your own feelings. But my very first film was in Sweden, and it was during the Vietnam War, and it was about these GIs who just went AWOL, which is the name of that film, AWOL,
Hmm.
and all of their experiences. And it was a very well received movie, certainly for my first. I was written up in a number of the magazines, but it wasn't my story. I wasn't in Vietnam. I wasn't a soldier.
Hmm.
I told that story. And then when it comes to the film we did with My Brit and Aldo Ray and Fernando, that was a beautiful story about a woman who was losing her mind. I never knew such a person. And so this is not about me personally. It was about the research that I did and about some of the things that did touch me very personally and very deeply. And that movie was quite successful, but it wasn't me. And this book is. And so I've got nowhere to hide.
So let's talk about the protagonist Ben Zelig. I don't want to say the protagonist Herb Fried, but that would be a faux pas. Yet you mentioned earlier about how some things are preordained, and life is kind of outlined and is going to play out the way it plays out, regardless of what you think you can control or can't control. So having said that, Ben, the protagonist, he seems to have his life all figured out. He knows what's going to happen. I'm going to get a congregation. I'm going to meet a nice Jewish girl. I'm going to start a family. Sounds like he's got the whole thing mapped out, but then somewhere along the line, something goes wrong. Tell us about what happens to Ben.
Well, he was young. When you're young, and especially you're doing well in your studies and school, and I was studying dance with Martha Graham and feeling elated and studying acting with Paul Mann at the Actors Workshop. Everything was going beautifully in my life. So that was all terrific. And so I thought, what could go wrong?
Uh-huh.
Oh, you mean life? Oh, that's something else. Because that's when you begin to encounter things that you haven't planned and that you can't control. And you suddenly have to find your path through the roads and the byways that other people have selected. And you found that out immediately in my first year in the rabbinate. I was there to present myself, or at least what I understood about the Bible, the Talmud, about Kabbalah, about all of the great things that I'd studied, the wisdom of Abraham Joshua Heschel. And there I was preaching, only to discover that there were a lot of yawns in the audience. People were not necessarily talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to discover that there's a whole lot more to learn in life than what I thought I knew, I thought was the end of it for me. It was
Uh-huh.
only the beginning.
Well, I remember when I graduated college a while back, I remember thinking, gee, all I need to do is I need to get my own apartment, I need to get a job, and I need a girlfriend, and then life will take care of itself. There's nothing else to worry about. Not that those three things were so simple, but even after that happened, and then as you say, the rest of life happens. The rest of life got in the way of my beautiful plan that I thought, my 3-point plan of happiness. But I know
Well,
exactly what you mean. Um,
well, we are kindred spirits, you and I, but so are all the readers from the feedback I get.
Great. Uh-huh.
Because gee, we started out that way too. What happened?
Right.
Life.
Exactly. And the things you can't possibly imagine. And you meet the person you do, and you always say to yourself, gee, if I was just looking right instead of left, I might never have met her and I might never have gone down this whole path. But somewhere, some
Yeah,
higher power said, this is how it's going to work out for you.
that's it. You read my book.
I had to do my homework, right? But let's talk about Ben. Over 30 years, one thing that happens to him is he actually loses his faith at one point, correct?
That's correct. I mean, in the rabbinate, you deal with all kinds of life events and death, life, marriage, birth, death. And so you become somewhat, not inured, but accustomed to dealing with the various stages of life that every clergyman has to deal with. But for Ben, the hardship that he experienced came quite suddenly. It happened when he and his wife Marion were on a ship, and it was a tour ship. Their daughter had just been bat mitzvah. She was beautiful and beautifully done. And suddenly on the voyage, she suddenly developed pneumonia. That is his wife, and from the pneumonia came shock. And she passed away immediately. And so the shock was so great that the two of them, Ben and his daughter, had to find a way to survive. And they were like two survivors on a raft, and they were so close together. But then she grows up, graduates from high school, and goes away to college. And Ben, once again, is totally bereft. Where does he go now? Everything that he thought could keep his life stable was beginning to drift away. And slowly he found that it was harder and harder to believe. And with that, his faith just left. And that's the beginning of the last story. You can imagine how it ends. It ends in such a way that it's not what you imagine.
Well, you know, so many times in life, I guess people don't understand something that happened to them and they want to ask themselves why? Why would some greater power have this happen to me? And I think the truth is, usually you don't get all the answers by the time it's over. You know, you don't have the benefit of that. And I think what your book certainly tries to do, at least from a personal sense, is explain some of that thinking and some of that feeling so that it can be helpful as well as entertaining and engaging. So, you know, throughout the stories, there are women that Ben is drawn to, and there are women that are drawn to Ben. Tell me why Ben's search for the right woman was a central theme in your writing.
Something that I began to understand, I say about the middle of my life, is that women are absolutely the superior gender. I absolutely believe that. But not only because they continue to give birth to children and raise families, but because they understand, they perceive in ways that are far deeper than what we do. I don't know how I would have done any of the things I've done without a magnificent wife who constantly was able to, in her own way, and I found in a very kind way, to help me see the world through her eyes, which were far more perceptive than my own.
Okay.
So I love women.
The story that is entitled "And a Pair of Pants." I'm wondering if there's a way you can talk about that reference without giving the story away. But even if you can't, tell me a little bit about the character Uncle Joe, who is the one, I believe, who plants the idea in Ben's head that when you're going to go negotiate, you know, the pair of pants reference comes up. So tell me what you can about that.
Uncle Joe is based on my Uncle Joe.
Okay.
He was the only member of my family. It was quite a large family. My father had 5 sisters, and the families always got together. And Joe was the only member of the family who was both illiterate and a millionaire. And how did that happen, one could ask? Because he could count. And he could count without fingers, just count. He understood life. And when Ben has doubts about the rabbinate, about the future, Uncle Joe steps right in with a very thick Yiddish accent. In fact, one of the writers had a charming thing to say that she was reading with an accent when she read that chapter. But Uncle Joe was a guy who just knew things. You know, he knew about life. He understood business. He understood very complicated things because he just focused on the issue. And he didn't have the education, but he had the brain.
Okay. Let's jump ahead. From a literary perspective, who would you say are the biggest influencers of your writing?
Philip Roth, number 1. Malamud, number 2. Golding, Tennessee Williams. Flannery O'Connor wrote the kinds of stories that I used to love to read. Everybody, I just love to read. And I don't know of any writer, any author, who wouldn't just rather spend his whole day and night reading, because
Uh-huh.
reading is wonderful. But then, by the same token, reading what you've written is also great.
You know, you mentioned Philip Roth, and as you were describing your process of getting up in the morning and what you do and turning to laughter, I read now when he passed away not long ago, and I saw a quote from Philip Roth, and I won't get this exactly right, but he said something to the effect that every morning I wake up, I go sit at a desk, I turn my computer on, I hit a few keys for a couple of hours, and then 2 or 3 years later I have a book. I thought that was a nice
that's a
little,
that's a perfect description of the process.
right.
That's
I thought that was great. So we often talk about books that change lives, and I think with us being in the publishing industry, of course, lots of books influence us, and we absolutely love them. Is there a book that you could say this is the book that changed my life?
I would have to say that the book that was most influential on my life wasn't fiction. It was by Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was a professor of mine at the Jewish Theological Seminary, and he wrote about life, about the Torah, and about how it interplays with your life, and how it enriches your life. And though I am not devout, and once I was, but that's that his connection. One of his books was Man and God, God and Man, and the connection between man and God, or man and I prefer to call it the spiritual. And as do many of the people that I talk to this way about books, are very spiritual. And I talk to a lot of people around the country who are not Jewish. In fact, for a good part of my interviews on the previous book on Bashert, because the word Bashert is a Yiddish word meaning preordained. I had to spend at least 10, 15 minutes explaining what that word meant, because they were not Jewish, but they had a sense of spirituality that connected precisely with mine. And so that was for me a great revelation.
That's great. What's on the horizon? What's next? Any projects in the works?
Yes, a book.
A book. Go figure. Can you tell us about it?
I really can't. But I'm involved with some wonderful people that have seen me through the past book. Meryl Moss is a phenomenal book person. She knows everything, and I listen very carefully to what she has to say. I have an excellent editor that works with her and with me, and that's Sherry Ann. And so these are the people that I'm working with now to help develop some of the things that I really want to do. So yeah, there's another book on the horizon. It may take a bit longer than this one. We'll find out.
Okay.
But yeah, what writer doesn't love to write? Only reading is more interesting, but writing is soul saving.
And I understand you've taken up another interest that has nothing to do with writing or reading, and you're taking piano lessons?
For the first time in my life, it's phenomenal, it's sensational. And anytime I come, in fact, when I'm writing and I need a break, I sit down and start playing. And I've only been taking lessons for about 4 or 5 months, and it is just exhilarating. I can't believe my fingers touch the notes, and I know what's going to happen, what's going to come up. It so happens that I have a particularly good pitch. Never knew that because I never played an instrument, but that's great. And I recommend it to everyone, especially old people, old senior citizens like me. Get in there, start playing, and it will be a new source of pleasure and joy for you.
But it's so fascinating that at this stage in your life, after all these years, at some point you might have thought, gee, this is something maybe I want to pursue, unless you were tied up with other things like being a rabbi and being a writer, right?
Well, yeah, except that the way it happens, we have a magnificent piano because Marion was a wonderful pianist. And when she got sick, we just closed up the piano and never started playing. And I had some people over the house at one time for a little dinner party, and one was a great musician. He looked at the piano. He said, "This is a wonderful piano made in 1926." And he hit a key, and he said, "Oh my God!" He said, "What happened?" I said, "Well, I haven't tuned it." He said, "You could be arrested for that." He said, "That you can't have a piano like this untuned." So he said, and he gave me the name. He said, "Call him right now." The piano tuner. Piano tuner came in, And then he said, hit a couple of keys. I did. He said, okay, sounds all right. Now you have to go to a good teacher. And he said, I happen to have the one for you. And he sent me to a teacher, and I've been going to her twice a week, an hour each time, playing and rehearsing every day. And it's wonderful. It's certainly when you're writing.
And I would bet that here's a piano that Marion loved and excelled at, and again, you probably just shut it, after she passed away, and now you're thinking, I'm going to give this a shot. It's got to be, to me, it sounds like a very loving connection and a reconnection with her.
What a beautiful insight that is. It's exactly the way I happen to feel, but didn't feel quite right mentioning it, because it wasn't on my mind. But now that you've put it into my words, into my vocabulary, into my brain, yeah, that's it. I'm keeping her singing.
That's beautiful. So let me ask you just one more question. Just I was trying to envision, you're in a bookstore and you're looking at various people looking through the shelves and everything, and you see that this person grabs Love, Faith, and a Pair of Pants, and they're starting to thumb through it and look through it, and you just happen to be leaning over their shoulder as this happens. So if you were to tap this person on the shoulder, what would you say to them? What kind of advice? Would you give him advice? Would you give him encouragement? Maybe a warning? I don't know. What would you say to somebody who just picks up your book and is contemplating it?
I don't have the guts to do that.
I know, so that's why it's hypothetical.
Yeah, I look, and I look a lot, but you never know when somebody's going to say, yeah. All you need is one, yeah, and that'll darken your whole day. So who needs that? On the other hand, if they say, this is wonderful, I'm not going to go say, yeah, isn't it? Then go to page 47.
Right.
Say, I want them to enjoy it as they can, according to their own background, according to their own information, and according to their own values.
Great. Well, we've been talking with Herb Fried about his latest book, Love, Faith, and a Pair of Pants. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, Herb. I love the insights, love the descriptions of why things are the way they are in your book and your writing. And again, I would grab a copy first chance you get, and hope we chat again soon.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful talking to you, Jim. I really loved it. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Great.